Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit. You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM.
And we thank you for joining us this week, Thursday nights on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel, Friday nights and Saturday mornings live coast to coast on the BetQL network. Whenever you want it inside your Odyssey app as a podcast, download it today, AUDACY, and take us with you. It does not matter at what point of the weekend you are getting ready for some college ball. We are here to take you through some of the biggest games and biggest storylines here on BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I am Chris Mack, and we do have at least 3 or 4 huge games to get to this weekend. We have time to get to it, one of the most ridiculous totals we have seen. And we've talked about a lot of ridiculous totals, especially as it revolves around Iowa football in the past. But this may be the lowest one we've ever seen. Like literally, like it's no hyperbole there. The lowest total we've ever seen. We'll get into that. And let's start, though, boys, with the CFP rankings, which remain essentially the same. Top 8, unchanged. Ohio State still number 1, Georgia number 2, Michigan 3, Florida State 4. And then just below the line, Washington 5, Oregon 6, before we get to Texas. Bama, who oddly enough has dipped way down in title odds. Get to that in a second. Ole Miss number 9. They get a big chance to jump up this week. And Penn State number 10, an opportunity for them as well. We'll get to those games, Ole Miss, Georgia, Penn State, Michigan, and a few others in just a couple of minutes. But let's start there. Nothing changes, at least in the top 10, John. Outside the top 10, Oklahoma State with the big jump after they win Bedlam, and Oklahoma with the big drop. And the only other big movement, Alabama goes from 14-1 at one point in national championship odds to now 7-1. It feels like mid to late November, this is the time of year where we all sit around and look at each other and go, Bama might get in, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And you know, I mean, look, that was I didn't know if you had like a second half of that there, like you were going to sort of add your own skepticism on top of it. But yeah, I mean, it was my best bet last weekend against LSU. And, you know, look, I'm happy to have won the bet. Who knows how it would have finished up if Jaden Daniels can finish that game. Obviously, Nussmeier goes in and it's a totally different dynamic. But look, I mean, we talked about where was the value. We had this discussion last week, even though the playoff rankings are unchanged. We had this discussion last week about who would you, if you gave somebody $100, who would you want to put that on? And for me, the answer was Bama there at 14-1, like you said, because, Milroe to me, like he's taking a lot of heat, but he looked great last week. I know it's an LSU defense. It's not very good that like anybody can take advantage of, but his speed is a real weapon. So yeah, it's starting to be about that time, man. It's about to be Saban time in college football, and we're careening towards that Bama-Georgia SEC championship game. I know Bama's a short underdog. Would not be surprised if that changes by the time we get there.
Well, look, I mean, if Bama winds up winning out, then I think it's going to be really, really hard to keep them out. Even though there's a head-to-head issue with Texas, if Texas wins out as well. And that's going to stick with the committee. And the committee doesn't really follow the head-to-head rule. We've seen that in past where teams with the same record are behind teams that they already beat. So they don't necessarily have to follow. That's one thing I have my problem with the committee is that they're not consistent year to year with what they care about. Their criteria is constantly changing. Evolving's good, but, if you care about head-to-head one year but not the next, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I think there's going to be a lot of people in Texas that are going to be really upset if they both win out. But Alabama is that one team like that. Those title odds jumped quite a bit. That is that doesn't happen. Like Vegas doesn't make that mistake, but obviously they got over the LSU hurdle, and that was a big one.
What's wild to me is we're talking about nothing changing in the rankings, right? At least in the top 10. And yet we're also talking about the number 1 ranked team and the number 8 ranked team having the same national championship odds at 7-1, Ohio State and Alabama. And you got a mix of crazy things going on in between. Clearly, the Pac-12 teams are at a disadvantage. Washington's 12-1, Oregon's 10-1, and the SEC teams at the advantage, including Georgia plus 250, Michigan plus 225, still the favorite to win the title. So in essence, what we're talking about here, or at least what the books are talking about, is Michigan still favored to win out and to beat Ohio State in the process. And that's why they've got the best national championship odds. I just think it's the craziest part to me is not even necessarily, John, that Bama and Ohio State are both 7-1, the first ranked team and the 8th ranked team. It's more that you've got Michigan and Ohio State with that big a disparity in title odds, because I don't see those two teams that far apart. And really, it's coming down to one game.
You're exactly right. And I mean, I think we got the first look at the opener in that one this morning, and I think Michigan opened at -6. So I mean, that's why you're seeing, right? I mean, it's obvious, but that's why you're seeing, the futures priced the way they are, because the power ratings of these books have Michigan at as a 6-point favorite, over Ohio State. Look, they're a beneficiary of the circumstances of the schedule, right? They're a beneficiary that they still do have as of today, and that's going to start to change here very soon, because Michigan's got Penn State on the road this weekend. Bama picked up the win against LSU. But for now, they still do have the most compelling resume. But yeah, I mean, a deeper dive into it, a deeper look into it, and you could start to understand, why they are priced the way they are, because the projection is they're going to lose to Michigan, and so that will obviously change everything for them.
Are they? Are they going to lose to Michigan? Because last I checked, Jim Harbaugh has never beaten Michigan. I don't count the last 2 years. That's cheating Jim. There's a big difference between cheating Jim and current Jim. All right. Current Jim gave them the most points they had up. They allowed all year to Purdue. Most points.
He's still going to be cheating, though, isn't he? I mean,
first week without cheating. No. You know what he is? You get pulled over by a cop. You get a speeding ticket. You drive like 65 miles an hour. You drive right at the speed limit for about 2 miles. And then you go right back to your own ways. He's still in his 2 miles. He's still in that. All right. He knows that they're looking. They're looking. He ain't never beat Michigan. He never beat Ohio State. And he knows that. He knows one way to beat them is to cheat.
Well, and he's go back and look at before the last couple of years. I think Choppy may have a point here,
I'm just
and a
saying,
really good one,
bro. He's got those signs. Dog. He still got them. So
here's the thing.
Look, Ryan Day is a lot of things, but I don't think Ryan Day is dumb enough to not change them by now, right?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know.
They've changed the sign. If I'm Ohio State, here's what I'm doing. This is the flex I'm pulling. First of all, you change your sign. Second of all, every home game I have leading up to Michigan, I am not allowing fans in. I'm going full COVID year, no fans in the I'm not allowing any fans. So there's no way. I'll take the hit. I'll take the monetary hit of 105,000 Buckeye fans, and I'll say, nope, here's your refund. No games. We're not playing any home game in front of crowds until we get to the Michigan game. See how you like it.
Hey, people would buy that, bro. I know it sounds ridiculous as hell, but they would 100%. If you told them, hey, we need to beat Michigan, so in order for us to do that, you guys can't come for the next 2 weeks, they would be like, you know what? Fine. We agree.
No TV. Not televising the game either.
Fight it.
It's going to be like
fight it.
It'll be available on Raycom. That's it. It's just on Raycom.
CW. Yeah.
Emergency broadcast system.
It'll be on Jefferson Pilot. Remember that? Remember Jefferson Pilot?
Hey,
what's crazy is I don't see any sort of reaction in the numbers, at least I don't think, to the whole controversy. Like, I don't like. I would maybe you could argue that the reaction is Michigan still remaining the favorite despite the controversy because everybody sees the kids on that team sort of buying into the we're the bad guy kind of vibe and playing within that narrative and amping themselves up in that way for it. I certainly think, and we'll get into Penn State, Michigan specifically in a couple minutes, but I certainly think if I were a kid on that team and I had nothing to do with any of this, right? Like I'm just a kid on the team and I just know I go out there and play. I'm going to be motivated by this. They think we're a bunch of cheaters. Okay, let's go show them how we do when we're clearly not cheating or we'd be stupid to cheat, right? We're the bad guys. Okay, yeah, us against the world, sure. So I think that's an interesting aspect of this that Michigan does have going for them over the final few weeks of the season. I wanted to touch on something real quick. This is, John, you weren't with us last season, but RJ and I spent a lot of time last year going through some ridiculous totals on Iowa games. It felt like for the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season, we would spend a couple minutes every week talking about the new low we had reached on Iowa football totals. It's gotten as low as it's ever been. Iowa Saturday hosting Rutgers. The total on this thing is the lowest of any college football game since at least 2000, according to ESPN stats and info. It will be the first game with a total of less than 30 in ESPN's entire odds database. So we're going back about a quarter century here. As it sits right now, Choppy, 28.
They should pack in both programs. If you don't want to enter 2023 and you still want to be out there running triple options or whatever crap they've got, that's on you. This is a game. This is a point total that belongs at a service academy. That's it. This is a service academy point total. Army and Navy, they're the ones that have this kind of point total because that's the style of play they play. And it's really a lot of out of necessity. It's out of tradition as well. You know, Rutgers and Iowa, they should not be anywhere near this. Like this should not. Now I get it. Iowa's got a really good defense. That's playing a big part. But come on. This is embarrassing. This is embarrassing. 28. That was supposed to be Brian Ferentz's per game average, right? For the year.
Yeah.
In order to keep his job. And this is the total for the game.
They're bad. They're both really bad. Rutgers is worse, but they're both really bad, John. 28 is just bananas.
Yep. And I wouldn't take the over. I mean, I feel like every time, whether it is a service academy or whether it is any random Iowa game, Northwestern, whatever, you're tempted. You're like, man, like they'll just, throw a pick six or something. Dude, no. I don't know how. This game's going under. It's a dead nut under. I mean, no matter what,
it's got 12-6 written all over it, or 13-6 or something like
exactly right.
I don't like. Okay, Rutgers is what it is. Although it's actually last year or two been a little bit better at Rutgers than it was for the last decade or so during the non-Schiano wilderness that they had between his tenures. But Iowa, I mean, this is just year after year after year. And you're right. They gave Ferentz the sort of benchmark to, hey, get to this point or else your contract's not renewed. And that's including like special teams and defensive points too. Like he gets credit for those and he's still not there, Choppy.
No, he's not. He's not even close. He's not there. He's not even close to being there. Yeah, that whole thing's a mess. The entire thing's a mess. God, I saw this crazy stat about like no team in the Big Ten West would have met that criteria this year. No team. What is do they have a calendar? Do they have a calendar in Wisconsin and Minnesota in the western part of the Big Ten? Do they have a calendar? I don't know. I'm asking. Like I don't know. Is that what year are they in? What decade? What century?
They're still playing 7-man football in a lot of those places.
Is the high? They still have high grass. Remember Notre Dame used to have like ankle high grass on their field. Like that's what's going on there. Like it's just they can't run. They can't run. That's it. Like it's awful. It's awful football.
Well, it's a self-fulfilling thing, because who would want to play there on offense? Who would want to play quarterback there? Who would want to be a receiver there? And defensively, like you're like, yeah, damn, they get guys in the NFL. So the best defenders go there, and no offensive players go there. And so you just have this vicious cycle that like is never going to end until the end of the world. So I don't know about you guys. I mean, I there's no way I'd play quarterback at one of those places, in one of those spots.
No.
Like,
no, you might, you know
what I'm saying?
Yeah, you might as well be signing up to be a gym teacher in 4 years if you do that. Go and play quarterback at a Big Ten West school.
Yes, exactly, man.
A couple of top 10 matchups, one in the SEC, one in the Big Ten. We get to those and a handful of other huge games we got to try and get to alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy. I'm Chris Mack. You're locked into BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY, and live coast to coast on the BetQL network, plus on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel. This is BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. We've got some huge games to get to. A lot of really good games, some of which, if we don't get to them in this segment, we will save for our final segment of the show before we get you our best bets. But a couple absolutely enormous ones. We've got a battle of top 10 teams in both the SEC and the Big Ten. The big one this weekend, of course, Happy Valley. Number 10, Penn State, hosting number 3, Michigan. This one has moved down to 4.5 throughout the week. Total sits at about 45.5. And James Franklin is the story here because, at least in my opinion, guys, I think the quarterbacks are a bit of a wash, McCarthy and Aller. Obviously, McCarthy with a little bit more experience. But James Franklin, 3-16 in his career against top 10 teams at Penn State, and 4-15 against Ohio State and Michigan. He's already lost to Ohio State this year. That was on the road in Columbus. Maybe something different again at Beaver Stadium, as Penn State's run defense looks like it should be much more prepared this year. Best in the Big Ten, second best in the FBS in yards per game, best in the Power 5 to handle the Wolverines' rushing attack as opposed to last year when they got absolutely steamrolled. Plus, the other thing here, John, Penn State's got the best turnover margin in the country, and if they can force a key one at an opportune time Saturday afternoon, maybe, just maybe, Penn State, if they don't pull off the upset, keeps this thing within a field goal and is able to cover.
Yeah, I don't even want to do it to you, Chris. I feel like I'm like a doctor giving you bad news, man. But I did find I don't know how, but I did find a Michigan minus 3.5, 105 out there today, and I played it. For all of the reasons, quite frankly, for all the reasons that you kind of laid out for me. I mean, you sort of made my own case, which is James Franklin's record against the heavyweights, of this league and of this conference. And as you guys know, I was on Penn State against Ohio State, and I know the touchdown with the other got called back, but really outside of that, like Aller just didn't really do enough, man, to make me think that he's capable, of leading an upset like this one. Now it is home, and that is a big difference, but it's also a day game. If it was a night game, I think it'd be a little different, right? So the energy, may not be as high for that crowd. And Michigan's built for that. I mean, they got a bunch of guys between McCarthy and Corum and the receiving core. Like, I just don't really think they're going to be, starstruck or anything like that. So I do have Michigan in this one. I just cannot trust James Franklin home, away, neutral, Anchorage, Alaska. I just am done with it. So I'm going with Michigan in this spot.
Choppy, tell me why I should have some level of hope here and why John's totally wrong.
Well, he's not totally wrong, but you should have some level of hope. I'll give you a couple of reasons. Okay. One, throw all that James Franklin crap out there. James Franklin hadn't had a quarterback. Now he does, right? It's about the quarterback. Okay. It ain't about anybody. It's about the quarterback. You get yourself an elite quarterback, and you got a chance in any football game. I don't care what level it is. You got a chance. And if you're the better quarterback, you're probably going to win the game.
If they let the quarterback play, if they let the man throw the ball downfield.
Well, that's true. That's a big part of it. That's a big if. The aspect of him against Ohio State, I just did a quick Google search. I just found out about Google the other day.
Congratulations.
If you go to his Wikipedia,
sound like you had just discovered it.
I found this thing called Google, guys. Listen, there's even this thing called Wikipedia.
Ironically,
he was using a microfiche. He was like.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I do see this Wikipedia thing. They're asking for money at the top. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
It does say Drew Aller is a 19-year-old kid. 19-year-old kids don't play well on the road. 19-year-old kids ain't going to Ohio State and win that football game. You're a dead man walking right there. I think it's a totally different game here. I think it's a totally different animal. I think Penn State's got a real shot. And you know what? The Big Ten is rooting for Penn State. They are absolutely rooting for Penn State. They don't want Michigan to go undefeated and beat Ohio State and then have to hear the chirping. They don't want that. They want Ohio State to be the team. I fully expect, it's my grassy knoll theory, I fully expect that there to be some hoodoo voodoo going on with the referees this week.
I don't know. Is that a different brand of voodoo than just regular voodoo? Voodoo?
Totally different. The hoodoo voodoo.
That's like next level voodoo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Something to keep in mind when you look at the total. Like I said, 45.5. Penn State 6-2 against the spread this year, but in their 8 games, 5 of them have hit the over. Michigan's against the spread record is a 4.5 point or larger favorite, although you just heard John mention a couple minutes ago, you can find it as low as 3.5 in some spots, 4-4-1. That's the first top 10 matchup of the day. Michigan, Penn State, number 3, number 10. Let's talk about the one in the SEC. And before we get to Bama, Kentucky here, I want to talk about Ole Miss and Georgia. Because I watched Feinbaum this afternoon. He talked about Lane Kiffin a lot. You got number 9 Ole Miss visiting number 2 Georgia. Georgia laying 10.5. Totals at 58.5. And look, I know I put Georgia on upset alert last week, and it looked kind of foolish based on the final score, but that's a near scoop and score away from being a whole hell of a lot closer. Ole Miss is 4-0 in one-score games this year. Now, I get it. This isn't A&M. This isn't Auburn. This isn't Arkansas or even LSU. This is Georgia. But Georgia has had to close late in the fourth quarter 3 or 4 times this year. Again, Ole Miss, they're not Vandy or Auburn or South Carolina or even Missouri. As I look at it, the quarterbacks, I've been talking about this being the year of the quarterbacks here, Beck and Dart, for the most part, a wash, in my opinion. And you can look at the numbers. They're crazy similar. Down to the touchdown and interception number is exactly the same. To me, it comes down to Quinshon Judkins and can Ole Miss force some turnovers. They're the best in the SEC, John, at +8. Georgia's only +3. If the Georgia Bulldogs, I know we've been saying this for a month and a half now, if Georgia lets Ole Miss hang around, all it takes is one big run from Judkins or one big turnover in the red zone or something. And I think, forget just covering, I think we've got Georgia, again, at least in my opinion, on upset alert. There go the sirens going up. That's what my fingers are doing there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we've been trying to scalp Georgia the whole year because they just sort of are mechanical and they're not necessarily, domineering in the way that they're winning, but they continue to win. Ole Miss is definitely the best offense they have seen. There's no doubt about that. And, Ole Miss has some pretty impressive wins on their resume thus far. Obviously, the win against LSU at home. LSU is at full strength then. Jaden Daniels played the whole game. I do feel like this is the kind of game where Georgia could, to whatever extent that looks like, right? I really think this is a game where you can scheme up something that, this opened at 12 and it's down to 10.5. And I know that's not a huge move. It's not like doing any key numbers there, but I do think that feels too high. Could Georgia win? Sure. I mean, they're a double-digit favorite, but I do believe that with Jackson Dart and that running game, which, has maybe as effective as we thought it would be going into the year, like you said, I do believe that this is definitely Lane can have this team prepared to go in here and keep this game certainly close. Georgia has sort of shown some vulnerabilities and played with fire a couple times against much worse teams. So, yeah, I mean, the only way I could look in this one is Ole Miss and the points for sure.
Choppy, are we stupid to keep questioning Kirby and the Dogs here? Or is it just a matter of time now before they stumble if they keep playing with fire?
Someone's going to beat them. It ain't going to be Ole Miss at home. The football gods ain't going to allow Lane Kiffin that kind of pedestal to be
satisfaction.
Put on. Yeah. They're not going to allow that satisfaction. They ain't going to allow no statue in Oxford for Lane Kiffin because he'd get one if he beats it. Someone's going to beat these guys. I just don't know that it's Ole Miss is the one. Ole Miss is is a team that I don't think I just don't see them going up in weight class and winning this game on the road. If Georgia's going to lose a game they're gonna lose a road game. They'll lose a road or they'll lose at a neutral site like in Atlanta against Bama. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm with you, John. I think the play is Ole Miss in the points, but man, I don't know that I'm going to take somebody to beat Georgia outright. That's not at home, not yet.
Yeah,
someone's going to do it. Someone will do it. They're in the midst of a 3-game stretch where they're playing, 3. I mean, I guess dangerous opponents, but not that dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's this week they lose.
I also think that Ole Miss is going to be like really popular, right? Like they're going to be a popular play on that money line, and I try to avoid the trendy money line plays like that because it's very rare that they pan out like that. I love the points. I think they'll find a way, even if let's say they're down 3 scores, 17. They can backdoor that all day. But I wouldn't really try to get, and maybe live, but not pre-flop. I don't think I'd try to get involved with anything pre-flop on money line.
Plus 340 Ole Miss on the money line, and the 10.5, like John just mentioned, a good chance even if Georgia is controlling this thing late to perhaps catch a backdoor cover. The other one in the SEC, everyone will have an eye on. Bama goes to Kentucky. They've beaten the Wildcats in 7 straight. This will be their first trip to Lexington in 10 years, though. Kentucky's last win over Bama, 1997. So it's been just a little bit. Saban at Bama, how about this one? Our producer Zach gave us this during the break. Saban at Alabama, 27-0 straight up in games that kick before 12:30 p.m. Eastern. This is a noon kick. I feel, guys, you mentioned it earlier in the show, John, like Jalen Milroe gave us a whole bunch of double middle finger, you like that Kirk Cousin type vibes, the way he performed last week. Like, hey, you want to keep questioning me? I'll go out and beat Jaden Daniels. Okay, you're right. Yeah, he leaves the game, but still, four touchdowns on the ground.
Yep.
And Devin Leary has been disappointing this year, to be honest. Some clunkers against Missouri and Georgia. Not all that hot against Mississippi State last week either. I don't think 10.5's enough here. I think Bama handles business on the road, John.
Yeah, I mean, look, the only, there is an angle here, which is the complete emotional letdown. I mean, going from just a massive win, a win that kind of keeps you alive for the college football playoff, and doing it, in the end in good fashion and comfortable fashion. Now you're going on the road against a team that you've owned forever. And whose season really isn't going anywhere. I could actually be talked into 10.5. I don't want to lay 10.5 with Alabama. I just kind of feel like you get a more sleepy effort in this setting. But I actually think Kentucky plus 10.5, 11 is a little. It's gross. But only because the letdown. Only because and if a couple turnovers here and there, I could see that happening.
Right.
But it would just be the letdown angle. Alabama wins, but do they cover? I think that's sort of a separate question.
What's the number for you, Choppy, to jump on Kentucky here?
I think when you get into the, you got to get outside the 2 field goal, the touchdown 2-point conversion and a field goal. I think you got to get at least a 12.5 for me to feel to remotely good about it. And I'll be honest with you, 12.5 is not a good number for a dog anyway, because you get a late touchdown, all of a sudden it's 14. That's not really a great number. But I think 12.5. I do think that Kentucky's a decent enough team to be able to hang with them. There is, Milroe is playing much better, but there are enough people that still, that while Bama's a good team, this is not vintage Bama. This ain't older brothers Bama still.
Yeah, this isn't really a bet on Bama minus 10.5 as much as it's a bet on Kentucky not being able to come close to that. Like I think back to what Georgia did, and again, we've all doubted Georgia all year. Kentucky was like a get right game for them. And I look at what Georgia did to Kentucky, and I say, man, imagine what Bama's defense can do to Devin Leary. And I picture him. I picture a lot of mistakes on the Kentucky side, not really being able to get any traction going on offense, John, and just Bama's defense kind of running this thing. And yeah, if it's going to be a lower scoring game, the total on this one I think is 47. If it's going to stay under the total and be lower scoring, maybe 10.5 is harder to cover. But, I mean, it's not hard to get this thing to like 35-10, 31-13, something like that, 31-17 even. And we've still got a comfortable cover.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm not running to the window to bet Kentucky here by any means. The way that Jaden Daniels and that LSU offense operated, I would say probably 75% of their big chunk plays was Jaden Daniels just leaving everybody in the dust. And that ain't going to be what Devin Leary does, right? He made a few throws that I can sort of call top of mind off the top of my head, but when I think about how LSU scored, it was just Jaden Daniels just making something out of nothing, and that ain't what Devin Leary's going to do. So it's not a strong. I have to play this, but I'll be watching. See if what it sort of looks like live. Maybe jump in then.
Yeah, we got Choppy. We got about half a dozen other games I kind of want to just touch on real quick, and maybe not even get to each and every one of them, obviously, but just talk about which ones we like the most, which ones we may have plays on, and which ones we think could have the biggest impact. We'll get into those. A couple out west in the Pac-12, 2 or 3 out west in the Pac-12, a big one in the Big 12, another SEC matchup, and one that may actually matter in the ACC, or maybe it's just somebody rubber stamping their way into the CFP. That's all on the way alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app. Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
And as we lead into our best bets in just a couple of moments, welcome back into BetQLU. Whether you're watching us on the Odyssey Sports channel on YouTube, listening live coast to coast on the BetQL network, or listening to us as a podcast, perhaps in your Odyssey app, we appreciate it. Again, best bets in just a couple of moments, but let's go rapid fire because there's a bunch of really good games this week, guys. And we'll go Choppy, then John on each of these games. Let's start with number 21, Arizona at Colorado. Arizona, last I checked, laying 10.5. Totals at 54.5. The Buffs have become, well, they've become what a lot of us expected early in the season after that early season pop. Now down to 10, Arizona. This one, the total at 54.5. Again, I think I like Arizona to cover just because they've been covering everything lately, Choppy.
Yeah, they have, but I mean, 10.5 is a lot, right? I mean, that's there are 10's a lot
on the
of
road
points.
too.
Yeah, on the road. So I don't know if I like them to cover. I do like them to win the game. You know, Colorado's in a tricky spot. They've got to win this one. They've got them, and they've got at Washington State and at Utah to end if they want to become bowl eligible. Like that, they've got to win this game because they're not going to sweep the other two games. There's no chance. At best, they're going to go 1-1. So it's a huge game. Jed Fish did a nice job there at Arizona. I like Arizona to win. I think the over hits, man. I mean, Colorado can't stop a nosebleed.
Yeah,
and they can score on you. So I like the over.
That's the one I really like there, John, on that game is the total at just 54.5.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, for those reasons, I certainly could not take the under. I do think when you consider, I mean, this was a pick 'em 3 weeks ago on the look ahead. And I know that like Dion has sort of lost his ever loving mind in terms of the way that he's, I mean, he's really shown, I think, his inexperience, with the way that he handled Sean Lewis and the offense and everything along those lines. But I mean, there's still NFL talent up and down this roster. So, for me, it would be Colorado plus 10 and pretty comfortably. I mean, it's very difficult to go on the road in conference and cover such a big number. I know Colorado's going to certainly give up its fair share of points, but it's going to put up points too. So right. I think 2 scores here essentially is a place where I'd like to get involved if you like that game, which I do. So it would be Colorado plus 10 for me.
Let me keep it in the Pac-12 for just a minute. Utah, Washington, because this is the other ranked matchup we didn't have a chance to get to earlier. Number 18 Utes, the number 5 Huskies. Washington laying 9.5. Total sits at 50. I mean, this is immovable object against irresistible force. I kind of use Utah's loss to Oregon earlier in the year as a benchmark for this one. That's one of the few spots this year where Utah has shown cracks in their defense, but they were big cracks. And if Bo Nix was able to do that, I think Michael Penix, especially at home, John, will probably be able to do something similar.
I completely agree. Washington's going to put that offensive pressure on them the same way Oregon did. I mean, they can do the same exact things. Maybe they don't have, the interior perhaps in the trenches, but the reality is that it's the exact same step up for them. And they just really don't have the ingredients to keep up. I think where they're going to be their best at is exactly what we saw against USC. You just submit your opponent. They don't want to get physical. They don't want to get in between the tackles. Washington's too good. The goal is right in front of them. And look, I mean, the only thing I would worry about is just a little malaise, like just sort of as you're getting to the end of the season and you're so close. But I think I think very highly of DeBoer, the coach, and I don't think he's going to let them, lose that focus. So I think 9.5 is about right. I don't really have a play on it, but I would have no interest in the road dog here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say here, RJ, is Washington has, I think as John alluded to, like it's maybe the malaise factor is a part of this, but I think it's more about, hey, the finish line is in sight now.
Yeah, if you think Washington, if you think the over is going to hit, take Washington to cover. If you think the under is going to hit, take Utah. That's kind of how it works, right? You get a dog to covers. It's generally going to hit the under. I would lean, if I was going to play this game, I'm not, but if I was going to, I would take Washington in the 9.5. I think if I was going to play this as the play, Washington beat Oregon. It was a close game. Oregon Is a really, really good team. They're much, much better than Utah. Utah has problems at quarterback, and Washington doesn't. At the end of the day, that's a treacherous recipe to have to deal with.
Let's go to the Big 12 and your neck of the woods, Choppy. TCU hosting number 7 Texas Longhorns. This one only at 10 last I saw, and Quinn Ewers is supposed to be back. It's actually moved a lot since I last checked, now 12.5, and maybe that's the confirmation that Ewers will, in fact, start in this one. But 12.5 on the road in conference, I get it, but and we don't know what we'll get out of Quinn Ewers either, RJ.
No, we don't. TCU's done a nice job against Texas, dating back years and years and years. TCU's always given them a game. I'm a little surprised that they're going to play Quinn. I think this is very, very telling from Malik Murphy that they're going to play Quinn Ewers in this game, who, let's be honest, they don't need him to beat TCU on paper. Talent-wise, these two don't belong on the same field with each other. The Horned Frauds from last year are showing their true colors, man. They're showing that purple. But, this is Texas all the way. I don't know that I would play it, only for the standpoint that, they should have lost last week to K-State. They probably should have lost that game. And they had a sizable lead. Malik Murphy did nothing in the second half. I think it's a big reason why they're kind of bringing Quinn back.
Yeah, it feels like the Horns are clinging to life here, clinging to playoff life here, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Texas is actually a play at 12.5. What's TCU playing for, right?
Right.
I mean, they're one of the. I mean, it's hard to call them like a disappointment because they just lost so much. I mean, they were in the championship game last year, so it's hard. I don't want to be too hard on them, but I mean, change of quarterbacks, falling out of the top 25. I mean, I can't really see. I mean, I know you get up for ranked teams and everything like that, but now you're bringing back Quinn, who you guys know I think he's an NFL guy, and so I think that's gonna bring some real juice to this team. And I think 2 touchdowns is, I've got this at 14, so I think at 12.5, that's a play for Texas for me.
ACC number 4 Florida State hosting Miami, laying 14.5, and look, they I don't know, maybe they were just playing with their food last week against Pitt. Maybe it was a trap game for them. I don't know what it was, but they nearly blew it. This is an opportunity. Look, Florida State Miami isn't what it once was when we think like, especially late 80s through late 90s, early 2000s, that sort of 15-year period where this rivalry was really white hot and intense. But it's still a bunch of kids who know each other from playing against each other in high school or maybe playing with each other in high school. There is still a lot of that there. I think Florida State gets up for this one. Miami, as far as I'm concerned, has been a disaster this year. Give me I think 14.5. Again, conference game. That's a big number. But Florida State's at home. I got no problem laying the 2 touchdowns in the hook, John.
Yeah, I mean, that hook is the only thing. It always is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had this discussion with Ohio State and Wisconsin, and I think Wisconsin ended up covering that on, maybe it was the hook. I mean, Miami lost by 2 touchdowns last week against NC State. NC State's horrible. So, I mean, but it's just one of those things where, for all the reasons that you outlined, because it is personal and because it is that, that Florida thing, like, it would not surprise me if this was close, honestly. So 14.5, I hate to part with you, Chris. I think I'd have to take the hook here just because it is personal. Personal games tend to be a little uglier. Good call. Choppy.
I actually like Miami in the 14.5. Okay. This is a team you cannot figure out. And It would not stun me if Miami scares them. You may not win the game, but it wouldn't stun me if they scare them. The committee is dying for somebody to lose. Like they want somebody to lose. Now, they're going to get one of them with Michigan, Ohio State, but they want somebody to lose. There's no doubt about that. They want either Washington
right?
lose.
I mean, every single week it's the same, right? It's the same top 4. There's no, I mean, there's nothing. There's no topic of discussion right now in college football.
Right.
We didn't get a chance to touch on Tennessee, Missouri, or USC, Oregon, but a couple of other really good games out there to keep an eye on. Tennessee, Missouri, a really interesting one. USC, Oregon, we'll see if the Ducks have any problem. They're laying 15 against USC. But let's get to our best bets before we wrap things up. John, what do you got for us this week?
It is GBO, Tennessee, Missouri. Tennessee minus 1.5. Found that at 105. I just think this is sort of the week where, Missouri kind of, I think, emptied the tank against Georgia, keeping that close on the road. Cook's banged up, Burns banged up. Tennessee won by 1,000,000 points against UConn on Saturday, and they were humming, and they didn't even have to play their guys in the second half. So they're pretty rested. At the beginning of this year, we were talking about Eli Drinkwitz is probably getting fired. There's a reason for that. Same roster. We're having the same conversation. They've overachieved. There's no question about it. And I think this is the week where Tennessee comes in, puts it down on them. And Tennessee looks like the team that they are. And Missouri gets back to looking like the team we expected they would be before the season started. So I will take Tennessee. No, it's on the road. Don't care. Tennessee minus 1.5.
Look at the smile on RJ's face when he hears that.
Yeah, baby. That's what you need. You need a big win in Columbia. Yeah. It's just like when I was in college, I was like, man, I can't wait to get those wins in Columbia, man.
Right, right.
That's right.
We're dying
the whole year.
That big Colorado SEC East rivalry between Missouri and Tennessee.
Yes. Absolutely. Nothing quite like a team in the SEC East that is further west of Fayetteville. Give me Colorado State minus the 3.5 against San Diego State. I like Colorado State minus 3.5. And how about this, Chris, for you? UCF money line, Arizona State money line, and your Penn State Nittany Lions money line will pay you 43-1.
We are. I love it. I obviously do not have the stones to bet on my guys after they lost in Columbus. That would be betting too much with my heart, and I'm going to bet with my head instead. We already talked about it earlier, but I really like Ole Miss to go into Athens and give the Bulldogs a scare. I think we talked it out plenty to the extent that none of us think Ole Miss is necessarily going to win outright. I'll give it the little upset alert. I'll give it the little siren emojis.
Yeah.
They'll at the very least make it uncomfortably close, much like Missouri did a week ago. And like I said, Ole Miss 4-0 in one-score games this year, and Georgia has had to close late in a lot of these games. Ole Miss, one turnover, one big Quinshon Judkins run, and this thing could turn bad for Georgia in a hurry. So give me Ole Miss plus the 10.5 on the road for my best bet this weekend. We will bring it back next weekend, talk about all the results, talk about what this CFP picture looks like. Will it be the same top four again, or will we have some upsets to perhaps give us something new to talk about? Thank you for joining us on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel, inside your Odyssey app, and live coast-to-coast on the BetQL network. For RJ Choppy, for John Martin, for our producer, Zach Kroll, I'm Chris Mack. This has been BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.